My parents divorced when I was pretty young. I was, I think, 5 years old. My parents met in Alcoholics Anonymous. My dad's been sober for like 40 years. My mom had been sober for a significantly less amount of time. They started this relationship, and my mom like relapsed right around the time that I was like between 2 and 3 years old. And so not only did she relapse, she relapsed like really hard. And while she was relapsing, she was having like a lot of other mental health crises. My mom, I think, was the one who ultimately said, I gotta go. I'm out. I'm leaving. And my dad just couldn't do anything about it. It really hurts that she just like completely abandoned me. I think getting stuck being the victim, that is like such a huge temptation. And I think that when you get hooked on blame, you're just taking away all of your own power to like heal.
Welcome to the Restored Podcast. I'm Joey Panarelli. If you come from a divorce or broken family, this show is for you. We help you heal your brokenness, navigate all the challenges, and build healthy relationships so you can break that cycle and build a better life. My guest today is Ben. He studied theology at Franciscan University of Steubenville, where he met his wife and was introduced to Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. After graduating, he married his wife, and the two of them became Focus missionaries in Alabama, where they spent 4 years leading Bible studies and mentoring college students. In 2020, they moved to Pennsylvania and continue to mentor young adults and lead multiple ministries at the church at their parish. Ben has 4 kids and 2 beehives. I'm excited for you guys to hear Ben's story. After a relapse into alcoholism, Ben's mom left him, his family, and the country for years when he was just 5 years old. When she returned, as you can imagine, he struggled in his relationship with her, but he eventually placed some proper boundaries in place and found some resolution. But his mom's death in Ben's late 20s brought new pain into his life. And in this episode, you'll hear his kind of wild story, plus the resolution that he experienced with his mom, an unexpected tactic that's helped him heal after his mom's death. We discuss justice, mercy, and whether blame is fruitful or not after your parents' divorce. He talks about how he was skeptical of marriage and what taught him that a good marriage, a good family is actually possible. And then we talk about the 4 characters we all play in life. And so if you struggle in your relationship with your mom, or maybe a parent died without you resolving things with them, this episode is for you. With that, here's our heavy but good conversation. Ben, welcome in. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. I know a little bit of your story from a distance, just being honest, and I'm really excited to kind of go into it a little bit more. So like we usually do, we'll just dive right in. What was life like in the years and months before your parents split?
Well, my parents divorced when I was pretty young. I was, I think, 5 years old when my parents divorced. So I don't have like a lot of experiential memories from that time. I don't have a lot of memories. I have very few memories of that time, like at all, actually. Almost all of the things that I can remember, my earliest memories, come after the divorce. But, recently I have been able to go through some home videos, and I got a box of pictures from my mom a couple years ago. And, you can sort of like pick out details from the videos and the pictures and everything like that. And, I've heard stories from my dad. I've heard stories from my mom and from her sisters about what kind of a person she was like and what my dad and her relationship was like. So basically, at the beginning, when you look at pictures or like home videos from, when my parents are first together, still deeply in love, all those kinds of things. I'm like 1 years old. My mom is just very, yeah, she's pretty. She's got long hair. She's taking care of herself. She's in the home videos, she laughs a lot. She's like getting outside and she's active and she's like doing things. There's this one home video where she's like making a birdhouse for a bird, and my dad says something like, "There's Jenny always looking out for the less fortunate," So like you just tell that they were. My mom was in a really good place, and my dad was in love with her. At least I could tell that, and you know, my mom had this like really big mental health like meltdown basically around the time that I was 2 years old. My parents actually met, from what I understand, my parents met in Alcoholics Anonymous. My dad's been sober for like 40 years. My mom had been sober for a significantly less amount of time. So they met in Alcoholics Anonymous. They started this relationship, and my mom like relapsed right around the time that I was like between 2 and 3 years old. And so not only did she relapse, she relapsed like really hard. And while she was relapsing, she was having like a lot of other mental health crises. Like she was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, and her world just really like collapsed in a big way when I was like between the ages of 2 and 3. And so as you're watching like the home videos, you slowly start to see more and more of that like pop up where my mom seems to be gaining weight. And at some point, like she chops her hair off, which is like wouldn't have been normal behavior for her, you know? You can tell she's just stops taking care of herself. Her voice gets like duller and flatter. There's this one video where she says something like, I'm happy to be home. I love my family and I'm glad I'm home. And what she's referring to is like she was in jail for a couple days due to a DUI, things like that. I remember a lot more like refereeing, a lot more fights. I can remember sometimes refereeing fights, and I remember my mom leaving a lot at night. I didn't quite understand then, but she was out going out to go get drunk with her friends. My dad was honestly still, I mean, so my dad had been through all that too. He was an alcoholic, he'd recovered. So he tried to be as understanding as possible, but at the end of the day, it was just very difficult for him to convince my mom to stay, actually.
Mm.
My mom, I think, was the one who ultimately said, you know, I gotta go. I'm out. I'm leaving. And my dad just couldn't do anything about it. You know, her mental health was just driving her in a direction that he just knew he couldn't really do anything about it. So, and that's kind of it happened pretty quickly. You know, I was 2 and a half when my mom relapsed and had her mental health crises, and I was like 5 when my parents divorced. So, in the course of like 2 years, 2.5 years, everything unraveled. And so it was just a progressively more chaotic environment, I think, particularly for my dad. You know, I was very young, so I don't know how much I picked up on it. I mean, I'm sure I did a lot, but for my dad, who was just he was really trying to keep everything together and keep her home and try to make her stay, but he couldn't at the end. So,
Man, what a heavy thing to carry as a kid. And even that scene, like that image of you like refereeing fights as like what, a 4-year-old?
yeah,
Like, what the
yeah.
heck?
So we don't swear, Dad. Don't say those words. You know, just like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I've seen that play out in situations that I've been, privy to. But yeah, man, that is so rough. Gosh, and I can imagine, yeah, what all of them are going through. Like all of you kind of having like your own unique experience in pain, like your mom too, It's just like so rough. Not to excuse the behavior at all, but it's like, my goodness, like what sort of pain and trauma and brokenness in, her life, which would have led her down that path again. It's super, super rough. And we don't have to go into that if you're not comfortable, but yeah, just like it kind of sucks all around.
Yeah, I mean, you generally don't have giant mental health crises unless you yourself have been hurt deeply by somebody, you know. And I mean, this is probably pretty familiar to anybody, like basically familiar with the idea of broken families is that, of course, my mom came from a broken family too. And people in my mom's family struggled with alcoholism and mental health issues. And she wasn't entirely protected from the darkness of what happens in the world, you know? And so, I mean, part of my having to deal with it as an adult is trying to wrestle with the fact that, you know, during those 5 years, my mom hurt me a lot, but I had to wrestle with the fact that she was also really hurt a lot. Like, how much culpability can you, I guess, assign her, and how much can you excuse it? That's the kind of
Mm.
difficulties that come with dealing with it
Yeah.
now.
I
Yeah.
remember Father John Burns saying that the Latin word for mercy, misericordia, literally means, to just have a heart for the misery of the other, right? To be
Yeah.
moved by the misery of the other, and like that being kind of a prerequisite to forgiveness. But it's kind of a scary place to be, like to, go into that and ask that question, like, what were they going through that caused them to do this thing that was wrong? Like, we're not excusing that by any means, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's such a tough thing to go through, but it sounds like you've had to wrestle with that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the years after the divorce, I mean, that's basically what I ended up growing up with. After my parents divorced, my mom went to like England for a couple years, and I don't exactly know how she was surviving or really what she was doing actually. But when she came back, I was getting older and just asking a lot of, you know, I was realizing how awful it was that my parents were divorced and how sad I was about it.
Yeah.
And, it was the question of like, how much blame do I put on my mom? Like, how much can I put was a question I asked myself a lot. And I think my tendency as a person is generally to not assign a lot of blame to people. I
Mm.
was significantly more merciful to her, but it's not like the right kind of mercy all the time necessarily. Like I think that I was significantly more, I just had a proclivity to like totally absolve her of all wrongdoing sometimes.
Mm.
Like that was just something that I did.
I've struggled with that too. I remember when my parents first split. Yeah, just like especially wanting to not believe essentially that my dad had any sort of part in it or any sort of responsibility for it because I looked up to him so much.
Yeah,
So I can kind of relate on the other end of it. But I'm curious, I have a couple questions about the
sure.
blame thing. Where have you come with that? Like, what are your thoughts on that? If someone maybe is listening right now and they're wrestling with that too, like, do I blame my parents? Do I not? Do I absorb it? Do I give them part blame? Like, where have you landed with that?
Yeah, it's okay, well, another thing to point out, my mom passed away a couple years ago. So
I'm really
my
sorry.
mom passed away about 2.5 years ago. So I was dealing with it a lot, like
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, because when somebody dies, you're forced to like reckon with their life story. Like that's what you do when somebody dies is you try to understand their life story and figure out, well, kind of put some finality on like, okay, what did this person mean to me? How did this person affect my life? Like, how do I want to carry this person on with me? And so obviously it engenders a lot of this kind of reflection. And I thought about the blame thing a lot, and it was really hard. The way that I have described it is that it feels like trying to fit a fitted sheet over a mattress, but the fitted sheet is just too small. And so it's like you put the two corners of the fitted sheet over the mattress and then you pull it one way. And as soon as you're about to like cover the whole mattress, this side like flings out at you. And it's like, that's what I felt like with my mom,
Mm,
and still sometimes what I feel like, where it's like, okay, I blame her. Like she was a bad person and she did terrible things to me and she did terrible things to my dad and she just in general lived a very bad life. And so I blame her. So I put like but then it's like I put the sheet on that side of the mattress, of the blame side of the mattress. But then I realized like, but she still was really hurt and she still had all of her stuff. And, the way that she made me feel, other people made her feel, maybe even 10 times worse. And so then you try to like pull it and try to get it all together, and then the other
mm.
side just slaps off. And so you like,
It's a
to
good
me, it's like
analogy.
really hard to wrap my mind around like the whole situation, the whole mattress, so to speak. And I don't really, I think that I basically landed on it is ultimately not my job to make a definitive like blame or not blame judgment,
Yeah.
that I can recognize the fact that she hurt me and she hurt my dad, and I can appreciate that and validate that fact and say, yes, this is true. And I can also say she herself was very hurt by her parents and by other people. And so I can validate both of those things, and you don't have to put all of the chips in one of those sides of the table. Like you don't have to say it was all the people who hurt her or it was just all her fault. Like I've tried to stay comfortable with the tension that comes
Mm,
about by saying, yep, she was really hurt and also she really hurt me. And just live in that tension and try not to have to follow it one way or the other, make a judgment, try not to make a judgment about it. And I think that's been really helpful for me,
mhm.
just to kind of take a deep breath and let it just not be a problem, whether she should be blamed or not blamed. Just let it be like it was a fact that she hurt me, and I can deal with that and also accept the fact that she was hurt by others as well.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
That's what I try to do nowadays.
And this has been something that has been a kind of a struggle for me. I'd love your further thoughts, but I wanted to kind of chime in. I've kind of had this conversation with myself and maybe even my siblings of like, was dad this percentage to blame and mom this was this percentage to blame? And I think you're right. At the end of the day, it is somewhat of like a fruitless exercise to try to like perfectly calculate and assign blame. And I think it can lead to like a lot of bitterness. At the same time,
Yeah.
what you said well of like speak the facts, just like state the facts. There's like something good and freeing about that too, of like not hiding from it, not pretending it wasn't that way, but just like stating the facts. This is what my life was like. This is probably why and mom acted this way. This is why things ended up being this way, and that sucked. Like that was bad. That was harmful. No child should have to go through that. So I like what you said about like that tension, and I was thinking too about what's the purpose of assigning blame. And I think in the, I think of like the justice system. It's like in the justice system, the purpose of assigning blame, assigning guilt, we could say, is trying to figure out what the, I guess, penalty will be in order
Right.
to bring some sort of like recompense or recovery or compensation, whatever that might look like, to the person who was hurt. And so I think in this situation, especially if we're looking at it through like the lens of like mercy and forgiveness, which, obviously goes like beyond justice, I don't think we need to be as like exact and calculating. What do you think about that?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to especially the mercy and forgiveness part, like there's a certain sense in which calculation is kind of like the enemy of mercy. I think that's
Uh,
absolutely true. Where if you are keeping score and you're saying, well, okay, if you're saying this person really owes me this, but I'm willing and have like a precise calculated like this person owes me that, but I'm willing to forgive that. I don't know if that is particularly merciful. I think what true mercy comes down to is like, I'm going to forgive you and extend my mercy to you regardless of how much blame you have. Like you and I are just we're okay. Like whatever like the count was, the count is no longer there anymore. And I think that if you keep that count, I think that can be truly an enemy of mercy. And I think that's true for anybody, whether it's like dealing with your parents, dealing with a spouse, dealing with friends. Like when you start keeping the scorecard, you just get a lot less merciful.
yeah.
It just you stop extending that mercy. I also think a
Mm,
big part of the reason why we want to like be able to clearly assign blame to one person or the other is because we're humans, and one of the things that we humans really like is having a nice clear neat narrative. Like we really like the nice stories of the most timeless stories have clear good guys and clear bad guys, and that's it, right?
yeah.
And we like to make sense of our lives in terms of that. We
Mm,
like to make sense of our lives, and assigning blame is a really good way of just making our narrative nice and neat. Like if I just blamed my mom and I just said, yep, it was her problem and her fault, and she was a bad person, and because she was a bad person, my parents' marriage failed, and because she was a bad person, beginning of my life was totally screwed up, blah blah blah, then it would be an easy story to go with,
yeah.
but it wouldn't be like the true story. And I think because it wouldn't really be a true story, it wouldn't allow me to actually heal, to actually become a better, holier person. It would actually stunt my growth and stunt my ability to interact with reality.
Mm,
So I think part of the whole situation is being able to step back and say, the narrative, the story, I am a player in that story, and the story goes way beyond me, and I am not going to be able to connect all of the dots from like a God's eye view. I have to be content to know and trust that the story does make sense in some cosmological way, and that I just can't know everything about it.
I love that.
So I think those are the two reasons really why we blame people is like I think we want to be able to like you said, know exactly what is owed us, and we want to have a really clear narrative. But I don't think that either of those things are particularly helpful for living your life.
Yeah, you're so right to point out that life is messier than the stories that we see in here. There often isn't like a clear resolution. And, in stories, there's like four characters, right? There's the hero, the protagonist, there's the villain, the one who's like the antagonist trying to stop them. But then there's also these two other characters. There's the guide who's helping the hero. And then there's also the victim, the people in the story who kind of are
Mm,
like helpless, powerless. And I think what I hear you saying is that if we get stuck on blame, there's a high likelihood that we're going to just turn to the victim. And if
that's
we
a
turn
great
into the
point.
victim, then what happens from there, as I know well, because I've struggled with this, is that we just start blaming our parents or our past for every wrong thing in our life and never take any ownership and never start working towards like, maybe I didn't cause that thing to happen, but I could take ownership of the solution. I could take ownership of like my life right now today, and I could, solve the problems that I'm faced with to whatever
Yeah.
degree I can. And so I think that's like a real danger. And I just want to put one caveat in there too. I think, in the process of forgiveness, I've heard people say, Father Mike Schmitz talks about this, how, there is a point to like counting the costs, but I see the blame thing as like almost like getting obsessive with that, as like taking that too far, not just counting the
Right.
costs in order to forgive the person and free them of their debt, but kind of, yeah, like you said, being a little bit more like scorekeeper, you hurt me this much, therefore like I deserve this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's such a tightrope to walk. You want to be able to admit that people did you wrong, but also not get too wrapped up in it. I
Yeah.
don't know how to do that. I mean,
I don't
that's
have the
just,
perfect balance either.
but yeah, I think getting stuck being the victim, that is like such a huge temptation. And I think that when you get hooked on blame, you end up doing that. And then you're just taking away all of your own power to like heal, you know?
No, I love that. And I'm glad we're going into this. One other thing I was thinking of was how the home videos seem to have impacted you. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what was it like watching those? And do you recommend people do that? Or, yeah, I'm just curious, kind of going back and kind of understanding your past, even before, like you said at the beginning, maybe you have like that explicit cognitive memory of what happened with you, even though it's kind of like baked into your bones, into your, subconscious.
Yeah, it was a really bittersweet experience to go back and watch those home videos because some of it just really sucked. I mean, some of it was just like it is really not fun. Like the videos that were closer, like during her mental collapse, basically, it was really not fun to watch that. It was like not fun to see her that way. It was also kind of not fun to see that like there was once a time where my mom was like super functional and happy and in love and stuff, and it was not really fun to watch that like transform into what I saw in the later videos. It wasn't fun. I mean, there were, but it was good. It was like, I think it was really important stuff for me to see because it helped me, I guess, fill in the blanks a little bit about, well, what was my mom actually like? And also, what was this process like for her? What was it like for my dad? What was it probably like for me as a kid, you know? Even though I technically experienced it, I don't remember much of it. So, like, I was able to watch myself and how like I was able to learn about how I was reacting to things by watching those videos, you know? That was I think that was informative too. So it just helped me get a lot of perspective on it. And, I think another thing that it did help me do was recognize that there were a lot of good things, and that was something that my
Yeah.
mom talked about later in my life, like before she passed away was just like, you know, she was like, obviously things didn't work out between me and your dad, but I want you to know that like it was really good for a while. Like it wasn't just garbage, but like we really did love each other. And she really wanted me to know that like I had come out of a relationship of love. And even though that relationship was like kind of corrupted or, even though that relationship was eventually broke down, I should say, that the relationship that I came out of was a really loving relationship. And it was good for me to look back and say, yeah, that's true. It was a loving relationship that I came out of, that I was produced by, you know.
Yeah.
So that I think that was really helpful for me. That was probably the most helpful thing for me to see, was just like they were in love. I had never seen that before. I had never known truly that my dad was in love with my mom or vice versa. Like I had never cognized, like recognized that fact. So being able to go back and look at old videos, is bittersweet. The bitter was it's not like that anymore, and it wasn't that way for very long. But the sweet was that there was something there that was good and human and beautiful.
No, I love that. And I appreciate you going there because I think like so much of what you said makes a lot of sense to me. Like the self-knowledge that comes from kind of understanding our family and our past is powerful. Like it helps us understand like why we think, feel, and act the way that we do. And then especially if there's parts of our lives that we're not super proud of, we want to change. I think there is power in like being able to over transform through understanding like the why behind why you do that thing, whether it's an addiction, a bad
Right.
habit, something like that. So I think the self-knowledge is really powerful, but kind of scary. I remember years ago, my dad has bipolar disease, and he was in the hospital and just in a tough spot, struggling. And I was trying to get him some help. I saw that the kind of typical conventional treatment of like, whatever they did in the psych hospital, like meds and shock therapy and whatever else, like wasn't really doing the trick. It had been like, I don't know how many times back to the same spot. And so I was like, there has to be another way. So I, looked into trauma therapy and found this awesome trauma therapist who we now work with through Restored. But as part of helping him, I went through and like created a timeline of his life. And obviously it was like somewhat of a timeline of my life too, seeing kind of like the ways in which he, like kind of what life had thrown at him without going into it too much. And it was really instructive. It was kind of painful, but instructive. And it led me to a place of like a lot more compassion for him, but also kind of a better understanding of myself. Like, wow, okay, this is where I come from. This is what was going on in my, grandparents' family. This is going on in my dad's life as a young person. This is what happened, around the time when my parents were getting married and dating and getting married, and then like early family life and all of that. And it was really, really eye-opening. Again, not the easiest stuff to swallow, but I do think it's helpful. So I'm curious if you have any advice for everyone listening. Do you think it's worth going back to that stuff and digging it up, or
Yeah.
what would you say? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely worth it. I think that it's vulnerable, certainly, but it's I would certainly recommend revisiting those old memories and those old pictures and those old videos and just facing all of that to help understand. And there are some pictures that I have of my parents that I like from the olden days that I like keep around and use as bookmarks, or old pictures of like her and me when I was like real young, like two, and she's just very happy and we're in a pumpkin patch or something. And I just try to keep them around just to have something good to remember that that helps me under just like go back to the fact that it's just more complex than it's just a more complex situation. There's good and bad in between. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that there's also a lot of it helps you. I did do therapy for a little bit for these kinds
Nice.
of things, and a lot of what we did was I forget like the technical name for it, but it's like when you remember something, but you're trying to like take all of the negative emotions that are associated with the memory and sort of just like diffuse them or change them. Like I
Wow.
remember my therapist, it was in college. He literally, it was like, it has something to do with REM. I'm totally butchering this, but like something
EMDR
about
maybe?
REM. Sorry?
EMDR, maybe the eye movement therapy. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
some? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the rapid eye movement for sure. And there's something about that that is connected with like our memories and our emotions. And so like he would give me these two little things and he would literally just like rapidly move the vibrations that I was holding.
Mm.
So it would vibrate on my right hand and then my left hand and somehow that like gets your body into like the emotional connection with memories thing.
Nice.
Don't know
Yeah.
exactly know how it works. And so then you would go through your memories and if you had a bad one something that was causing like a wound or a trauma in your psychological life now, you could go back and kind of like walk yourself through that memory and try to change your emotional perspective on it. And it would help you in your real life. And anyway,
Some.
whether you're doing the technical part of it or not, I think just going back and trying to encounter like the home videos and the pictures
Mm.
and revisit all of those bad memories, all of those things that ultimately are traumatic and hurt you, and try to achieve a new openness about them. And through that openness,
Mm.
alter the way that you feel or like alter the way that you look at them or your perspective towards them. I think that that would go a long way in helping anybody overcome like the hurdles of trauma in their day-to-day life now.
If you, like me, come from a broken family, you've probably experienced a lot of difficult emotions, and it's easy to deal with them in unhealthy ways. But one healthy habit that's helped me, working out consistently and eating how my body was made to be fed. It keeps my body healthy, and the endorphins help me feel happier and better navigate tough emotions. But I know it's not easy to start exercising or to be more consistent with it. You might be thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no time. I'm too unmotivated. That's why I trust and recommend Dakota Lane. He's a nationally certified fitness and nutrition coach who's helped 1,000+ clients, from beginners to even pro athletes. As a devout Catholic, he creates personalized fitness and nutrition plans with 24/7 support and one-on-one coaching. And since it's all online, you can literally work with Dakota anywhere in the world. One client said, "Dakota changed my life. His program is worth every penny. If you've struggled to change yourself for the better, Dakota is your man." To see what Dakota offers, go to dakotalanefitness.com. Dakota is actually giving away for free his PDF guide, The Biggest Fitness Mistakes to Avoid. You can download that at dakotalanefitness.com/restored. Again, that's dakotalanefitness.com/restored, or just click the link in the show notes. I love that. No, it's such good advice. And yeah, I love like the nuance that you're adding to that life is not just black and white. There's a lot of color in it. And yeah, no, this is so good. I'm sure everyone's thinking like, tell us more about your relationship with your mom. Like, where did it go from there? And, how did it end and things like that. So yeah, I'm curious. And I know it's kind of unique that I'm sure there's people listening who have lost their mom or their dad and are in a similar spot. But I think most people, listening, haven't had that experience yet. And so, yeah, I'm curious of any advice on that front too. But before that, I'm curious kind of how things progressed with your mom and where did they end up?
Yeah, so my mom, like I said, my parents divorced. My mom went to like England. I think it's basically kind of like a I'm gonna go find myself situation. Actually, she changed her name. So she changed her name from Jenny Pluta to Ada Fitzgerald because she wanted to like feel more connected with her like Celtic roots or whatever. And then she went to England to sort of like, I think just she was searching for like an identity that she felt comfortable with, right? Like
Sure.
that's why she changed her name. There's actually, when my mom died, I was going through some of her things, and she actually had this like name change announcement, you know, and it
Hmm.
was like she sent out, they were like almost like wedding invitations, and they were
Hmm.
really dramatic. On the front, it said, it said, "Oh, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would still be a rose." William Shakespeare. So it was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, what's in a name? William Shakespeare." And then it said everything, Ada Fitzgerald, and it was just like it was pretty dramatic. It was like a little a little cringy. But she like put a lot of stock in that name change. And so she
Yeah,
put a
it's
lot of stock
interesting.
in this trip to England. She was just trying to find herself. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, man, I can't imagine. But honestly, I think of all the things, I can't imagine what I was really feeling when I was like 6 years old and she left.
Yeah.
But of all the things now that still hurt, the fact that she went to England is the thing that hurts by far the most because I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it really hurts that she just like completely abandoned me, Like the fact that she just totally left. I can deal with you like trying your best and like still failing because you're an alcoholic or whatever, but like going to England really, really hurt me.
And she was there
So
for
I think,
years, right?
yeah, she was there for, I'm pretty sure, like a couple years. And when she came back, it was just I think she just really wanted everything to be okay between me and her. And I wanted everything to be really okay between me and her. So what happened was after she came back from England, it was like I was kind of almost like afraid that if I wasn't there all the time, she was just gonna leave again, right? Like if I wasn't the perfect son, that she was just gonna get out.
Hmm.
So there was a time where I was like probably when I got back, I was probably around 8 or 9, and from then until I was like in the 8th grade, so probably about 4 or 5 years, she had just like a string of just like really horrible boyfriends,
Hmm.
like horrible boyfriends, also alcoholics, and they would fight verbally, physically. I had to call my dad. I was like 10. I was like having to call my dad to like take me home. These were like be my like visitation weekends,
Yeah.
I was like, Dad, they're fighting. I really got to go. I think I tried to call the police one time because they were hitting each other. There was just like it was really some really awful situations, and but I still just was putting a lot of responsibility on myself to like stick it out with her. And once I got into pre young, like very young adulthood, and I was driving, like I took it upon myself to like take her to meetings. And even though I could now like not spend the weekends with her, because I was like, there was just nothing stopping me
Yeah.
from not showing up. I just still did it because I was like, yeah, I kind of hate this, but I don't want to be abandoned again, right? I just want to hopefully this would become something good. And
Mm.
so, that was really my mom's life for like a really just long time was she would and she would like go to rehab, and I think she had something like 13 rehab stints in her lifetime. Like it was kind of crazy how many times. And so that was just like our relationship was really marked a lot by that kind of thing, where I was trying really, really hard to be the perfect son, and it was just putting me in a lot of like emotionally abusive situations and everything like that. My dad was, and I think really is the reason why I didn't just completely explode during this time. My dad was a really good man, is a really good man, and I think during that time was incredibly supportive of me and understood everything and tried to help me like process all of it. And I mean, he was my rock during that
Mm.
time for sure. So I think that that was like what characterized me and my mom's relationship for a long time was like she was just spiraling out of control and making very little headway in any way. And I was just like always there, no matter what happened, no matter how much no matter how many inappropriate things she did or whatever, like I was just there trying to help her. And I think it finally started dawning on me how bad things were, how like inappropriate that relationship was, like when I got really only when I got married.
Yeah.
I myself got married, and I was talking to Carissa, and she was like, "Babe, this is really messed up." Like she was able to take like a an outsider's perspective and be like, "This is completely inappropriate. Like you need
Mm.
to like do something about the way she." I think one time I was talking to my mom, and I told her like I can't take you to the grocery store right now because my mom was never able to drive basically ever because of all the DUIs and everything. And she just got really mad and yelled at me and just said something like really nasty to me. And I was like, well, there goes mom. And Chris was like, no, dude, that's like, it's verbal abuse is what that's called.
Yeah.
And not just like it is not just like a there goes mom type situation. It is like a really bad thing, you know?
Yeah, it's not just having a bad day or like inconsequential comment here or there. It's like a clear trend and
Yeah.
serious. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like things that you wouldn't ever say to anybody, let
Yeah.
alone your son, you know. So
Yeah.
sadly, I mean, when I was a couple years after I got married, I told her I was like, "Listen, mom, I just can't keep having this relationship with you. I want you to be good, but like I am not actually helping you be good by continuing to be in this like to have this like relationship."
Hmm.
And I gotta step out. And for all of my mom's weaknesses, one of the things that she was like weirdly really smart and really educated and really understanding. And I think that she actually was able to totally see what I was going through and say, okay, so she had dealt with that fairly well. We had a daughter, and right around the time that my we had a daughter, my mom had like a serious like psychotic break, a series of six serious psychotic breaks. And she also was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh man.
So she was a lifelong smoker, but she also had like lymph node problems. Like she had like she would always have like she had some hormonal stuff, and she was always a smoker, so she got like lymphoma, which is actually
Mm.
like a fairly mild form of cancer. So she had this incredible like this very serious psychotic break, and then she got cancer. And I was in Alabama with Focus, so it's like at that point I was trying to call her every week because it
Hmm.
was just like, all right, you're clearly it was just a totally different situation,
Yeah.
like. And so I think the last time I saw her in like 16, probably 2017, shortly after that time, like in 2017, I was like, I can't really talk to you very much. We had my daughter in 2018. So like 2017 was like the last time I had really spoken to her. And then in 2021 or 2022, so like 4 or 5 years later, that was the next time that I saw her. And so that's like 5 years.
Yeah.
She had
Wow.
had like a fair bit of success recovering from like the psychotic breaks. She had a stable housing situation. My Aunt Gina was kind of working harder to ensure that she had like a fairly stable situation. And then, yeah, so I was able to like, she was able to meet her grandchildren, which was
Wow.
really nice.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice day. We went to the park. We went to like a nature center in Ohio where she lives, and she bought Magdalene and Jack, my oldest son, these little stuffed animals that we still have, and we spent about 3 hours together, and then we left to go home, whatever. And then I saw her again in 2022, like early in the year. So it was like 2021, brought the fam up. Everybody met mom. She's doing okay, you know. And then the next year I went to like an IHOP with her. And that was ultimately the last time I talked to her. And she seemed like she was doing okay. And then, yeah, it was just later that year in August. My son had just been baptized. Her cancer spread to her esophagus. And so she had esophagus cancer now. And basically the cancer ate a hole through her esophagus. So not to get like too gross, but whenever she was swallowing food or water, some of it was getting in her lungs. So it was like my son Simon was getting baptized, and she called me right before the baptism and she said, I'm going in, like literally, I was outside in my suit. Mass had just ended. The baptism was starting in like 10 minutes.
Wow.
She called. She said, "Hey, I'm going into the surgery. Everything's gonna be all right, whatever." And I was like, "Okay, but just call a priest. Like, make sure a priest comes. Like, don't go into that surgery without a priest, you know." And she said, "Yes, I'm calling the priest. Like, I want to get last rites. I want that to be a thing." So then I went in and we baptized Simon, and then we came home after the baptism, and I'm like, "Okay, I have no idea what's happening with my mom. Like, don't know." We were having like the baptism party, and I got a call from the doctor, and the doctor was basically like, there's nothing we can do. There was a complication in the surgery that happened. She was losing a ton of blood. They tried to stabilize her. Anytime they took her off the machine, she started to destabilize quickly. He was like, there's nothing we can do. Your mom is going to die. The most that we can do is like keep her alive until tomorrow so that you can get up here. And I said, all right, I'll go, you know. So I like went downstairs to the baptism party, just like sobbing. And I was like, sorry guys, you guys can keep eating food, but I'm just gonna go for a walk.
Oh my goodness.
And and I went to and she died the next day.
Mm.
All of her family was there. Me, my half brother was there. At one point, she like kind of woke up because they had her heavily sedated while she was dying so that she wouldn't feel any pain and so that it just like she wouldn't complicate anything. But one time the sedatives kind of just like weren't strong enough and she like kind of woke up and we were like, oh gosh, this is terrifying. But she like looked over and it was just me and my brother. And so me and my brother were the last things that she saw before she passed away. And that was a very powerful moment for me, I think, of just like everything is okay. Like the whole family is here. And the last thing that she encountered was that we were there, that despite everything, we still loved her. And that me and my brother recognized that we were still her sons and that she was still our mom.
Mm.
Um, that was really powerful. And I think it was just a good moment to like just try to end with harmony rather than disharmony. So that's kind of the story of what our relationship, and how it ended. And
Yeah.
um I'm really fortunate that it ended that way. There's no guarantee that the whole family would have been together for all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it seem like she was like apparently, my brother helped clean out her apartment, and like she was apparently still drinking and everything like that. Like it wasn't like a fairy tale, like my mom got better and everything was fine kind of ending, but it was something, it was something
Some
good.
resolution. Yeah,
Yeah.
some resolution. No, wow, you've been through
That was
phenomenal.
really long, and I'm sorry if that was too much, but
No, you're good. I mean, honestly, it's like it takes a bit to pull up all those memories and think like, let me just summarize my
yeah,
relationship
yeah.
with my mom in like 2 minutes. It's a hard thing to do. So, no, I appreciate you being so vulnerable. And yeah, man, I'm really sorry for everything you've been through. And more than that, it's like, yeah, that hurts. It's
Yeah.
what a rough thing to go through. But I admire you for, I mean, a bunch. There's a lot of lessons in everything you just said. But especially just like kind of ending with peace and harmony and trying to bring some sort of resolution out of like a really broken situation. So I admire that. I also, I think there's a lesson in the whole fact that Carissa was able to kind of come alongside you as an objective kind of third party and say, hey, this isn't okay. Like this
Yeah.
relationship isn't good for you. And then the result of that, from what you said, was that you put some boundaries in place where you
Yeah.
said, hey, I can't continue having this type of relationship in my life. And so I think there's something in that. I remember having a similar conversation with my dad when he was in a tough spot and kind of treating people, acting out in a way that I like didn't agree with. And I kind of felt like I was tacitly approving that if I were to just continue as if like, hey, nothing's bad, nothing
Yeah.
going on. So I
Yeah.
remember having a conversation with him. I didn't want to just ghost him. So I had a conversation and say, hey, dad, I love you. I want a relationship with you. As long as like your behavior is like this, that's not possible. But as soon as I see
Yeah.
signs that it's changing, like I'd love to resume that, restart that relationship. And so I
Yeah.
think that was like really big for me, and it sounds like it was similar for you. So yeah, there's a couple other lessons in there, but yeah, feel free to comment on any of that. If you come from a divorced or broken family, or maybe you know someone who does, we offer more resources than just this podcast. Those resources include things like a book, free video courses, speaking engagements, a free assessment, online community, and much more. All of our resources are designed to help you heal from the trauma that you've endured and build virtue so you can break that cycle and build a better life. And so if you want to view those resources for yourself or someone that you know, just go to restoredministry.com/resources or click on the link in the show notes.
Well, yeah, I think that, your goal with, I think anybody should be that you want to have some kind of harmony with that person. Like
Yeah.
you want to have a harmonious relationship. And if you just ghost somebody, like you're not
Yeah.
working towards harmony, you're just increasing the discord.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's just. I don't think that that is the right way to go about it. I think that it's could take some courage. I mean, and I can imagine there are probably some situations maybe where you need to just like, get the heck out and not worry
Yeah.
about it. Like I'm assuming that things are like relatively safe.
Right.
Um, if there's like some serious unsafety, like I can totally see, like if you think you're gonna get hurt, like you can talk later, like get out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, that's a good point. Or if you think like the reaction is going to be so strong that it might be, dangerous in that scenario, even or maybe not even dangerous, it would just be like overwhelming. Then I think there are other ways you can maybe break that news or communicate that, like a letter. That's what I did with my dad. I knew like doing it face to face wouldn't have gone super well. So I
yeah,
wrote a letter
yeah.
explaining things. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
I think the letter is also good. I called my mom. I mean, I was in Alabama, so like we weren't gonna have a face-to-face conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that all I'm trying to say is like in some way, for the most part, I think that you want to act in a way that is at least working towards harmony rather than actively undermining any chance of harmony in the future. That would be my perspective.
Yeah, I like that.
But
I agree with that.
Carissa was absolutely instrumental in helping me understand what's happening and what I needed. And it was
Yeah.
also, marriage itself, like for a long time, I was kind of skeptical of marriage in general.
Mm,
I was skeptical that I would ever be able to be married,
yeah.
because it was just like, well, the one marriage that I've seen ended pretty poorly. But
Yeah.
I ended up getting to know a lot of really solid families who were very committed. And I think that getting to know those solid families who were committed and who were not divorced and were raising beautiful families helped me realize that I could do it. And so then when I
It's
finally
awesome.
did it and I like got into that committed relationship and got married,
Yeah.
it was just kind of like a magnifying glass on all of the little like things that I had picked up from my mom, like all of these bad habits that I had picked up from being in a divorced house, and especially the bad habits that I picked up from having like a emotionally, verbally abusive mom, just like whenever we would get into if we would like, if Carissa and I would start having an argument and my Carissa would be just like, she would just like start to leave the room, like not even like a mad way, just like I gotta go do something. It was just like, no, don't go to England, just like, no, stay right here. Like,
Uh,
I do not want to let you out of my sight because like you're not leaving. I'm not gonna let you leave the way that my mom left. Like that's not happening.
yeah.
So yeah, that's just like one of the sort of, I guess, typical things that
Yeah.
I kind of had to deal with as I was entering into my marriage and becoming a father and stuff.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I've noticed, just the whole fact that we kind of reenact, we replay the things from our past, and especially like the behavior we observed in our parents. Because as humans, we just kind of mirror the behavior behind around us, unless we're like very intentional. But even if we are very intentional, we just end up mirroring the behavior behind us, around us.
Yeah,
And it's like we just have to surround ourselves with people who we want to mirror. It's essentially it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
but I know I think there's like such wisdom in that of like the lesson I took away is like as much as you're able to like spend time with surround yourself with healthy marriages and families. Like there's a lot of good. It was really helpful for me growing up too because I was the same. I was super skeptical of marriage. I remember I swore after my parents split, I'm like I will never get married. Like I would not want to be a part of this if this is where marriage leads. Like why
yeah,
would I want to go down that path? And so I
yeah.
think that was like really huge for me. And I love I think one lesson too for everyone listening, if you're not in a dating relationship or you're not engaged, married, or maybe even that person, your significant other, like isn't the one who can maybe be that objective party. I think there is something to be said for like finding a mentor, finding, maybe it's a relative,
Totally.
maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's, just someone in your life. It could be a friend who can just kind of be that objective third party and just say like, maybe you confide in them and say, hey, here's the relationship that I have with like mom or dad or whatever person. Does this seem like healthy to you? And if not, then they can maybe help say, no, it doesn't seem healthy. And I think, there might be a space for putting in boundaries so that you can eventually have a healthy relationship. And I think that's
Yeah.
something I always try to remember too, is that boundaries are not just, they feel mean sometimes, but they're really always ordered towards having a healthy relationship.
Having a healthy relationship. And I think like when I talked to my mom and I was talking about putting up this boundary, I was like, the only hope for us to have a good relationship is if we take a step back, like that is it. And I totally agree with you. I mean, you mentioned that like when your parents split, you were like, I'm just never getting married. I'm done
Yeah.
with it. And do you know the Paramore song, The Only Exception? Have you ever heard that song?
It's been a minute, but I do recall a
Yeah,
little bit of it. Yeah.
it's like that exact story. She's like, my daddy was awful and my mom left him, and swore that I would never love, but you're the only exception. It's a really cute song.
Beautiful.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Wow.
it's neither here nor there. You said that you really like did not want to be, in a married relationship. I was like the opposite. I was like, I really, 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 really want to find the one. And I was like
Mm.
kind of like a serial monogamist in high school. If I'm using that word correctly, where I would just like sort of hop from girlfriend to girlfriend, and like every single girlfriend was the one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what I realized on self-reflection is that I undermined a ton of those relationships because even though I really wanted to be married, I just like was super scared of it and didn't think it was possible and didn't really know what it looked like. And it was
Totally.
absolutely the mentors in my life that helped me understand what it was like to be in a healthy relationship. So absolutely, I think the most important thing to do if you in that kind of situation is to find somebody who is a good family, find somebody who has a good marriage, and just like hang out with them all the time. and and not be afraid to like there was one family in Ohio, the Kesslers, who I think I spent when I was in high school, there were probably times where I spent just as much time at their house than I did at mine, just because like they were a solid family and their parents were together. And like, once you spend enough time with the family, you see that they have struggles. But I just like wanted to absorb every last little tiny bit of goodness from them and like
Mhm.
learn from it and be able to internalize it. And I think they were really like a huge turning point for me in my life where like I was able to actually have a good relationship, after that.
Wow.
So
Were the
really, really recommend that kind of stuff
I
for
love
sure.
that. And I know we're toward the end of our time together, but Yeah, I was curious. Were there any particular instances where that really hit you, or was just it more of like a sum of the whole of like, yeah, this has just been a great experience knowing them, spending time around them, seeing how the parents
Oh
interact, and
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that it was just I can't think of a single moment where I was like, "Oh, this is what a real family is like." I mean, I got super into their family. Like
that's
they
awesome.
were, it was really awesome. It was they like quasi adopted me. And there were other
Yeah.
families too. Like I had one family in particular growing up where it was the same situation where they just really brought me in and had a huge heart for me because they knew all of the difficulties I was going through. But I mean, if I can remember anything, like there was one night where it was like a Thanksgiving and I like came over for Thanksgiving dinner and had Thanksgiving dinner with them after my family's. And then like I stayed to watch Christmas Vacation with them because they watch Christmas Vacation every Thanksgiving. And I'm pretty sure I stayed the night too, probably.
Mm.
And like the girls in the family were like my little sisters and the boys were like my brothers. And it was just like, this is it. Like this is what I want. And it was just really helpful to be able to be like, it is here. Like they do exist. Like marriage, having a strong family, having a good family is possible. It's just because it wasn't my experience growing up doesn't mean that I can't go on to create something like that.
So good. It's so hopeful. I love this, and yeah, there's so much more I want to say, but perhaps we'll kind of end on that. Well, I do want to hear a little bit just to tie up because I think people are probably wondering, like, well, what about you personally, like your journey, your story? So maybe we'll touch on that. There was something from your mom's story that I thought was really interesting. Both her going to Britain and then also changing her name. It almost was like she had this desire to erase the past. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us are there, and to one degree or another, where we've done things or have had relationships or things that was like, I'm not that super proud of that. Even if it's not a major regret, maybe it is. I think we have this desire to like erase the past. And I think what I kind of learned from you in this whole interview is like there's power in just kind of accepting it all, right? Accepting the good and the bad and kind of integrating that, or I know it's kind of a big word, but just acknowledging that like as people, like our identity is not just the good, but it also is the bad things that we've done. And it's kind of living with all of that, kind of coming to some level of peace and being able to say, okay, that was my past, but my future can be different. Like I can live life differently.
Yeah,
I think that's like really, really powerful. But I think a lot of people
totally.
do have that desire to erase the past.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that was what my mom did like all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that yeah, like the name change, she's like, I don't want to deal with anything that I have done. Like I want to be a totally different person. And going to England was like, I'm leaving America behind and I'm gonna go to like the land where my true soul resides and like start this new life. And
Mm,
she would always bring up these narratives, like with my brother particularly. My brother didn't see my mom for a long time when he was kind of younger. And my mom was always like, "Oh, it's his dad's fault because his dad's a lawyer and he like manipulated the system." And I talked to my dad and my dad was like, "Listen, your brother just like didn't really your brother just like didn't really want to go,
mm,
Your brother didn't want to see your mom." And I was just, yeah, I think that she just had this need to like forget the past and for herself too. I mean, I remember I would say like, listen, I forgive you for all of these things that you've done. Why can't you just forgive yourself? And she was like, yeah, that's the hardest part. Like I don't know how to forgive myself. So she
uh,
was definitely trying very hard to erase the past. And I think that coming to terms with what has happened is like a necessary part of healing for anybody, whether it's healing from alcoholism or healing from trauma or healing from your parents' divorce. Like you just have to say, own that part of you.
own
Like,
it.
yep, that happened. I own it. It's mine. And I take ownership of it. And now I can build something better for the future. I think that that's really important.
I love it. Because otherwise you're kind of stuck in this space of like, yeah, like
Totally stuck.
hiding. Yeah, you're stuck in general. And then you're stuck also like hiding. You're stuck trying to race. You're stuck trying to run from it. And it just is this, it's exhausting. It's not the place that
Yeah.
you want to be, not the place you want to live. So, so good. One thing I failed to ask at the beginning was, how old are you now? Because you kind of give us a good timeline of your
Oh,
life.
yeah.
And
I am 30. So, yeah.
so your mom passed when you were like 27, 28.
I was 28, I guess. I
Yeah.
just turned 28 when my mom passed away.
Okay.
So yeah.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then my parents divorced when I was 5.
Okay. No,
So
that's
yeah.
helpful. just to have the
Yeah.
timeline. And the let's see, the only final things I was just wondering is like one, were there any other big ways in which you were affected, like struggles that kind of came out later? And then two, like what helped you heal? What would you, and especially in the vein of like what maybe other people can learn and apply to their own lives. So what was kind of the way in which you were affected beyond what you already mentioned? And then what was really helpful in order for you to heal that maybe other people can learn from too?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned like the sort of like the serial monogamy, just like jumping from long-term relationship to long-term relationship, but feeling very afraid to like actually follow through with those commitments. A lot of stuff in marriage. I think personally, like the divorce and also like the things with my mom just really started like a precedent for a lot of problems with girls, just in general, like just romantic problems in general, like trying to feel validated by them. I know like pornography addiction was a big thing that popped up
Yeah,
for me.
me
I
too.
think that was just a huge way that I tried to feel validated by woman, get some feminine of affirmation in my life, was trying to get that through pornography. And, I'm actually still just uncovering layers of how my mom contributed to those things and how my parents' divorce contributed to those things. But I'm also I'm just realizing how deeply it is part of who I am, and
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I'm Catholic, so I think that the prayer aspects and the sacraments like really have helped a lot, like to
Mhm.
open myself up to that grace and receive healing from somebody who has that power. Like if you broke your arm, there's just like nothing you can do about it. Like if you have a cold or if you have, you're like just have various problems. If you have a cold, right? There's things that you can do to make yourself better. Like you can eat lots of garlic and you can eat honey and you can rest.
Yeah.
But like if you have like a broken arm, it's like you got to go to the doctors. And I think that a lot of the things that happened with my mom, there are some things that I can do to heal. It's like I can, I can go to therapy. I can evaluate my own means of communication and just communicate better with people.
Mm.
I can try to change my daily habits. I can try to change my mindset, whatever. But there's just like some things that I just like ultimately can't change about me. There's wounds that I can't do anything about. And so I try to
Mm.
bring those to the divine physician and let him deal with it. So that's been helpful. And I think that my relationship with my wife is just one of those things that has brought so much healing to me into these wounds. She's great and she's incredibly patient and just very loving to me, especially in the moments where I am feeling the most unlovable. So, yeah, I mean, she's the bomb and has helped me really, I think, work through so many of these different things. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's hard to pinpoint exactly, like, oh, this was the most helpful thing. I
Mhm.
think it's like a whole cocktail of like good stuff that
Yeah.
you have to do to heal.
Yeah. No silver bullet, only 100 golden BBs.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah. It's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, I love that quote. So good, man. Well, it's been such an honor to have you. The final thing I was just thinking of is just how we were talking about the different characters in movies and shows and stories, the villain, the hero, the guide, and the victim. And I think the truth of our lives, and we'd probably say of your mom's life too, is that we're all those characters to one degree or another in everyday life. We can switch between them. And I think there's a lot of power in choosing, to be the hero, the one who's like fighting for something that they want, something that's good, and the guide who's helping other people get the things that are good in their lives too. And, no matter what you've been through, I think especially with God's grace, like you're capable of that to everyone listening. And so thank you for being such an awesome example and sharing so vulnerably
Yeah.
with everyone about your story. And yeah, I did want you, if you would tell us a little bit about the work that you do, because one of the things I admire about you is that you've taken like all this pain, all this brokenness in your life, and now you're, obviously doing work on yourself and trying to grow, but you're also trying to help other people grow and especially grow in their relationship with God, which can be a struggle for so many people. And so I'm curious
Yeah.
if you would tell us a little bit about like the work that you do and how people can, even find you online.
Yeah, so I'm a missionary with Focus. Focus is acronym for the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. We're an apostolate founded in 1998, and the basic goal of Focus is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Catholic faith through spiritual multiplication and through incarnational evangelization. So those are big words. Basically, big fancy words for my job is really to like build personal relationships with people. I spend not a lot of my time giving big talks or like hosting big events. I spend a ton of time getting to know people on like a one-on-one basis or like a small group basis, and based on that, trying to help them, winning them over to the gospel, trying to encourage them to discover who Jesus is, and then building, like encouraging them to pray, teaching them how to pray, praying with them, and then also leading them with myself to do the same for others, to bring them into relationships with God. My favorite part about being a missionary is that I get to invite people basically into our family life. Like me and my wife have tons of people over for dinner
That's
all the time. We have people over to our house all the time. And so I like to imagine that I have done for somebody, or hopefully multiple people, what like the Kesslers were able to do for me, like mentor people in what it is to be a good family. That's what I do. I have my own little focus page. You can sort of check out my bio and find out more about my ministry if you go to focus.org/missionaries/Benjamin-Bluda.
And we'll link to that in the show notes to make it easier
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everyone.
and of course, yeah, and I'd be happy to give my email address. So, yeah, that's basically my ministry and what I'm up to here. And now I'm at a parish at St. Agnes in Pennsylvania, and so that's my full-time gig.
Love it. Thanks so much, man. And yeah, if you guys, especially those of you listening who know Ben and maybe weren't aware of his story and the work that he's doing, definitely check out that webpage. If you feel moved to, no pressure, of course, you can get in touch with him if you want to financially support him and his family to give him the ability to continue doing this work. We'll link to that page in the show notes. But man, it's so good to have you. I really appreciate just all the wisdom. I want to give you the last word, and I'm going to end it a little bit different than I usually do. And I'd like to ask just like what advice or encouragement would you give to someone in particular who maybe their mom, their dad passed away? There was a girl after I gave a talk recently, a college student came up to me and she was just confiding me like there was a lot of like unresolved brokenness, trauma, like problems with her dad, and then he just passed away, and she felt really stuck, like she couldn't do anything with it. And so I'm curious, yeah, if you have any advice for people in that situation, especially because you've gone through this to some extent. What advice would
Yeah.
you give them? Like, what can they do given that mom or dad are gone and they do have that desire they feel like it's unfinished, it's unresolved, they want to bring some resolution to it.
Yeah, well, I think that I can think of, maybe two pieces of advice, which, the first is from a faith standpoint, between all of us and our parents, we have our relationships with our parents, but, God is ultimately intimately involved in those relationships. So even if a parent has passed away, we still have a certain amount of ability to understand that story and interact with that story by believing that God is ultimately in control of it, that God is still in contact with our parents who have passed away, and also that we can, with God's help, understand the story of our lives a little bit better. So that's one thing, right? Just believe that through the Lord we still have contact with our parents in some way. But from just like a human level, like a universally human level, I think that one of the things that my therapist in college told me that was super important was that my healing does not depend on anybody else, right? Like my healing, like I can take ownership of it. And so if you're in that situation where like your parent died and you didn't get any formal resolution with them, I would just suggest like you can still take ownership of that situation. You can still take steps to find your own resolution. And I think that like some of the process that I did, like going through the pictures, right? Like going through the home videos, a project that I have in the back of my head that I haven't done yet that I should really do is I really want to like interview, quote unquote, my mom's sisters, because I think that that would give a lot of insight into my mom's life. Just like there are other ways, there are other people, there are other perspectives that you can get on your parent, and I think getting those perspectives can really help move you along. So that would be my final advice.
I really like the family photos and videos idea. That the timeline tactic too was really helpful for me as a way to kind of heal and better understand my dad and what was going on in our family. But one other idea I wanted to mention, there was a girl after a talk I gave recently who shared that her dad had died recently and she never really got to resolve things with him. And so my advice to her was just to write him a letter. Just tell him all the things you wish you could tell him in person. And then she was religious, so I said, and then just place it in God's hands. And I didn't get a chance to speak with her after, but I really hope it went well. So those are a few tips for you if you want to, try to find some closure and some healing if maybe one of your divorced or both your divorced parents died and you never really got the closure that you deserve. I hope that helps. That wraps up this episode. By the way, if you want to share your story with us, we'd love to hear it. If you want, we can actually post your story on our website as an anonymous blog article. You can go to restoredministry.com/story or click the link in the show notes to share your story. If this podcast has helped you, feel free to subscribe or follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your podcast app. Not only is that the best way to avoid missing future episodes, but the more subscribers we have, the more the apps will suggest our show to people who are looking for help. And there's a lot of people who need help, and it only takes a few seconds. If you've already done that, feel free to rate or review the show. We appreciate that feedback. And it also helps us to reach more people who are looking for some help like we offer. And in closing, always remember, you are not doomed to repeat your family's dysfunction. You can break that cycle and build a better life, and we're here to help. And keep in mind the words of C.S. Lewis, who said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending.